mean, it's your button. Go for it.
Welcome, folks. This is the Halloween special. This is the Trampled Underfoot podcast show. And your hosts are Mark Lindsay and Eloy Escajedo. Welcome. What's going on, Mark?
Trampled Underfoot podcast, where we ask the burning question: trick or treat?
I'd prefer treat than trick.
Myself included. Yeah.
You
And
never
you
know
know
what
what?
you're going to get.
Did you ever wonder where that came from? What the hell do we mean when we say trick or treat?
Yeah, I thought it was something to do with if you don't give me a treat, I'm going to do some little evil whatnot to you for not providing a treat. Something
That's
to that.
exactly what it is. That's exactly what it is. But yeah. Okay. Well, I had to look it up. This has been quite a while back, but basically that's it. And do you know how old trick or treating actually is?
No.
It goes back into, there are accounts of kids who would dress up as songbirds and go around from door to door and sing little songs dressed as songbirds, and the people of the house would give them little treats or candies or bread or something like that, and if they didn't, the kids would pull a prank on them later on. So I mean, this goes way, way, way back. But we've just, the association with Halloween or All Hallows Eve came about through Ireland and Scotland, and then down into England, and then we brought it with us, of course.
Um,
So
I know that in Spain, as far as a lot of these holidays that we observe here, they don't observe.
mhm.
And I believe, if I recall well, Halloween is just now picking up because word of mouth and TV and movies
Mhm.
and so on. American culture is. Um, I was thinking about this. It's a very powerful thing. Let me just use this to open the door so that Vigo can exit. There you go, boy. Um, that uh, American culture is a very powerful thing. Um, in that all this stuff comes in as far as like little signals of culture from other parts of the world.
Yeah.
We take it, mash it up, and then what comes out of that is a different thing with
Mhm.
origins from other places, but it's
Mhm.
now something that's been stamped with an American thing. And
Mhm.
whether people realize it or not, it gets redistributed out, be it music, be it movies, be it whatever. And everybody does little things of that too in their
Sure.
respective places. But
Sure.
America is very, very this is just my reckoning with, because I have been thinking about this sort of thing, and then they push it out. So things like Halloween,
Mhm.
if you think of all the movies that have been produced, and of course other places have produced movies too, and of
Sure.
course we're viewing it from an American standpoint, but
Sure.
things like the Freddie Mercury Nightmare on Elm Street thing.
Freddy Krueger. Freddie Mercury is Queen. Although, see Freddie Krueger with the little hat, and the hat and the glove and everything going, we are the champions.
I
My
like how
friend.
I like how I just mashed those two. It's so good. And and then there's the Friday the 13th, and then
Mhm.
there's all the different variations of even older horror
Yeah.
movies, and those things come from Europe anyhow.
Yeah. The
Um,
stories, the tales that they're based on. Yeah. Dracula from Eastern Europe, and Frankenstein from Mary Shelley,
yeah,
Brit. I mean, yeah, all those old tales.
but we tend to
Grab it
um,
and run with it, man.
well,
Turn
we
it up
take
to
it,
11.
we take it, and we, broadly speaking, forget the origins of it
Hmm.
when speaking of all these different things. In
Well,
context, or just broadly, we tend to forget culturally across the decades and centuries,
Hmm.
perhaps certain origins, and then it just becomes a thing that we do here, and then we redistribute it out through the movies, through the this and that, and it influences. It's a back and forth type influence type thing. I'm
Hmm.
not trying to say that other places don't do the same, and this and that.
Well,
I'm just saying that from my vantage point, I think that there's something to that.
well, I did look up trick or treating just to see where it actually started from, and it goes the actual trick or treating as we know it today goes back to Scotland and Ireland, where they called it guising. That was going from house to house at Halloween and putting on a little performance to be rewarded with food or treats. And that goes back to the 16th century. Okay. But the modern trick or treating as we know it is not an American thing. In North America, it goes back to the earliest known occurrence in North America was in 1911 in Ontario, Canada. And Trick or Treat was first recorded in Ontario in 1917. So it's actually an import from Canada
Interesting.
that we once again got hold of, turned up to 11, and then just kind of made it our own.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I mean, but you're absolutely right. American pop culture goes all over the place.
Yeah.
And it's funny how some, because like I know people in the UK who say, yeah, this Halloween thing is just another American import for better or worse. Now we've got it over here. It's like, dude, where do you think we got it from?
Yeah.
Remember, America is your fault.
Yeah. Well, we have a media machine.
Jim says, don't tell me we're responsible for all those tiny buggers out bugging people. Sounds like the people of Ontario are directly responsible, Jim.
But chances are that the people from Ontario, I don't know that this is true, but unless it's a fact that is you know closely held to the chest, I don't know that most people would have known that unless they actually. But maybe the locals there do. Um, it's assumed that as we know it today, it's American.
Yeah. I mean, well, look, Steve says, well, if it's Canadian, then I don't have to feel bad about shutting off the porch lights. Now,
Yeah,
um, Steve is you're kind of in the same situation I am, Steve. When was the last time you had a trick or treater? Because, I mean, how many people live on your street? 10, 11? Steve and I are kind of way out, you know. I mean, we've got houses around us and everything, but we've lived here since 2012. And the only trick or treaters we have ever had have been our nephew and niece when they were, you know, young. And now, we haven't had a trick or treater in 10 years.
yeah.
So, yeah, Steve said he's never had any. Yeah. Well, our relatives would come by and trick or treat us on their way to the rich part of Medford where everybody goes trick or treating because they give out full size candy bars.
Well, we've always had trick or treaters, but it's dwindled.
Mm-hmm.
Even in a city and town and county as Miami-Dade County,
Mm-hmm.
um, back in the '80s, it was full of kids.
Mm-hmm.
They're still kids, but the numbers are not as visually apparent.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
And out there on the main drag where you are, where there's a lot of high rises and stuff, I mean, there's still families living there and what have you.
I
But I
don't
would
see kids.
imagine, yeah, I would imagine you see mainly college kids.
Yeah, I think that there's something to do with what we've talked about in the past, where the population has gotten older, and not as
Mhm.
many kids have been produced.
Mhm. Well, not
And
only
I think
that, they're moving further out where it's cheaper to live. So,
there is no further out. Like when I, so at least here,
mhm.
you used to see kids everywhere.
Yeah,
You don't see that anymore.
right. Well, that's what I mean. Town has grown up around you, and it's getting more and more expensive to be there, and young families can't afford it, so they have to move somewhere where they can afford. So,
Well, the numbers say, to emphasize what my actual point is, although that's true too. If you can't afford it, you can't afford it. But the
yeah.
numbers say that there's a shortage of repopulation people,
Hmm.
and um, therefore less trick or treating. I mean, it's not like we don't have any kids, but
Yeah.
what I'm saying is that when I was growing up,
Hmm.
you'd walk out of your house any day of the week, and
Hmm.
on each corner there were groupings of kids,
Yeah.
either on bikes or, you know,
Hmm.
jumping jacks for and or
Playing
skating.
basketball or doing whatever. Yeah.
Everywhere they would be at the schools in the
Hmm.
um, uh, basketball court.
Hmm.
They'd be at the park,
On the
everywhere. Like it
playground
was,
at school, all that stuff. Yeah.
and parents would be holding the hands of kids going to the supermarket. It was freaking crazy. It was sort of like a society and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Now,
now
yeah. Now the scariest part of Halloween is being a home alone with a whole bag of Reese's peanut butter cups. You know.
there's a there's a big difference, at least locally, from my
Hmm.
perspective, looking at it,
Yeah.
just from my vantage point of that.
Hmm.
And there are numbers in the country, like there's a literal
Yeah.
more babies need to be produced and stuff. So you know,
Well,
there's
it's
that.
changing styles. I mean, years ago, large families were kind of the norm, and then they kind of shrunk down to where two or three kids was the norm, and it's shrinking down. And people are just waiting. They're waiting longer to commit and have kids. And that's a big part of it because some people, there's so much emphasis is placed on no, you've got to get your act together. As a guy, we know we have to, if we're going to do college, we got to get college. If we're going to just start off in a career, we have to get that career established because, you can't support a family working the drive through. So, you've got to develop, you've got to get your act together and get into your career before you can commit to raising a family. And for a lot of people, for too many people, that's just too late to start thinking about having a family.
Yeah, we've talked
You
about
know,
this. There's a
yeah,
lot of
we have,
there's a
but
lot of there's a lot of factors involved.
mhm,
Plus, there's the issue of, you know, willy nilly divorces
yes,
where the men, gen- to a certain degree, get the snotty end.
and that's turning a lot of men away from relationships.
Well, if you have logic
Hmm.
and you have none of the cards in your court,
Hmm.
and you
Yeah,
analyze that,
yeah,
so a lot of the things have been catering. I mean, have been tilting
hmm,
the thing, towards a society with slightly less people. And it's not just the United States, it's except South America and Muslim countries.
hmm,
As far as I've seen, I mean, there's others there, but
sure,
anything that's European like,
or
in terms of,
Asian.
or Asian. Well,
Hmm.
no, even Asian. China,
Well, it depends on where you're going. China, yes, but I mean, Japan, the Philippines, Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, um, even like Malaysia, Singapore. They're still,
not
you
Japan.
know,
Not That's not what I've seen with Japan.
Japan is kind of, Japan's been kind of strange since they opened their society in the 1840s. They've been kind of the anomaly, you know.
No, but specifically on the topic of next generation people,
Hmm.
it's not like there's nobody.
Yeah,
Like there's no. It's not like it's that.
right.
and then a regular person would probably on average not even tell a difference one way or the other.
Right.
But I've seen the numbers. It's not like I
Mhm.
have it in front of me, but I'm sure that it can be easily looked up. Um, South America, in general, the production of new generations is going on.
Mhm.
Muslim countries as well, but everything generally else, there's other exceptions.
Mhm.
It's not the same story,
Yeah.
and these things affect things like when you see holidays where kids should be involved,
Mhm.
like Halloween, which we're celebrating on this show for a few days forward. That's where it starts to sort of say, because I'm telling you, I here in my it here it was a big freaking deal.
Yeah. Same here. It was always a big deal. Always. Now,
And we had
let me
malls.
ask you
Go ahead. Go ahead.
let me ask you a question about that on that related subject, and it kind of relates to what Steve said here. I still buy the candy, we just eat it ourselves. We do the same. We buy one bag of candy that we both like, and just in case, and put it in a bowl out next to the door. And 10 o'clock that night, we shut off the porch light and we're divvying it up. She gets half, I get half. But I find that the people who enjoy Halloween are getting older and older all the time, the average age. I mean, it used to be, I remember when I was a kid, if you saw a parent dressed up or an adult dressed up, it was something special. Now, you see them at work, they're dressing in costumes. You go to the store and, you got a witch on this cash register and you got a cop on that cash register and you got a fireman over on this cash register. I mean, they're adults all over the place, and adults go into parties and bars and taverns and nightclubs hosting Halloween parties that go until the wee hours of the mornings. It just seems to me that it's almost like when you hit about the 1980s kids, they just never stopped celebrating Halloween and carried it on into adulthood, where kids of the 40s, 50s, and 60s kind of put that aside when they got into their teenage years. And do you think there's any validity to that? Or do you think that's, what we're talking about, the not having as many kids is one of the reasons for that, or what?
I guess the older a generation gets,
Mm-hmm.
the less and less of them from that generation
Mm-hmm.
participate in adult um, dress up parties. Well, at least not at least not Halloween ones. But I'm sorry, I had to throw that in there. Just for
Yeah,
that's a deviation so bad. Um, but you get what I'm saying. Like
I do.
the interests become adult interests,
Mm-hmm.
and um, you know, so I think that that's the case, and I think that um, from my perspective, there is something to be said about again the 20th century American experience, and I'm talking about my personal thing
Mm-hmm.
experience. There's something about the 20th century, particularly, I guess, the years that I was alive, but it goes to the past because we were taught by the
Mm-hmm.
past within that century. And you can tie everything together, but I
Yeah.
think that there's a delineating line when we left Kansas. Now, mind you, Kansas for me is Miami.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then, like I've mentioned before, my America, which is which I like to emphasize now because I found a nice, clever thing,
Yeah,
or at least that I think. So my America might be different than other people's America, that
sure.
they think they're the point of reference of America.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, there's really one point of reference of America that overtakes
Well,
all
sure.
others, and that reference point, there's no place more America, although others may not see it that way, to me than Miami. So from my perspective in Miami,
Mm-hmm.
which is different than
Sure.
a Seattle, a New York, or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and they might question my assertion.
Well, of course, because we are a culmination of our experiences. And if your experience from the time you're born to the time you branch out on your own and leave the nest, that's what you see. That's the America that you observe. That's the America that you experienced. And
Exactly.
any sense of nostalgia that you have is going to go back to that. It's the same here. I mean, I when I think Christmas, I think Oregon. When I think Halloween, I think California, because that's where I spent those holidays.
Yeah.
I grew up from the time I was 5 years old until the time I was 16 years old. We were down in the San Francisco Bay Area,
Yeah.
but we always spent Christmas up here
Yeah.
visiting grandparents.
Yeah. It's your experience.
Hmm.
But to tie up um, together the thought from my vantage point, the 20th century from here in my locale,
Hmm.
um, was just, to be honest with you, I mean, so overwhelmingly a positive and brimming with awesomeness. Now, I believe to a great degree, it's not every case with every person because there's people out there that had a crummy
Hmm.
90s, 80s, and 70s, and so on. I
Sure.
mean, there's variation, but like on 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 a broad scale, in generalization, I think that my thoughts of the latter half of the 20th century encompasses the rest of the country. Although I don't know the rest of the country's experience,
Well,
although I don't know even other people in Miami's experience, but from
yeah.
my observation window with the cultural signals through media that existed across time, it felt great. And there's like generally, and I think that there's a line drawn in the sand somewhere in the 2000s, maybe from
Hmm.
9/11 on, where things took a different turn in subtle, tiny little ways, little by little, arching into a different. Now, that's my perspective.
Hmm.
It's a general sense. I don't. I'd be open to arguments against it because there were great times in the early half of the 2010s, but and I don't know if it's due to with the more one knows or the more one clears the weeds on certain topics of what's going on or what's been going on, maybe you don't have the perfect um, view of something, but it's much clearer than when you were 15.
Well, do you think you're just paying closer attention to it now than you
No,
were back then?
well, my argument is that when
Hmm.
you're young and
Sure.
you are innocent.
Well, and you
uh,
have other priorities.
well, you haven't developed argumentations in your head or understandings of things that you would only consider as you go through life.
Right.
The more you go through life, the more different,
Experience you get. Yeah.
well, different topics that might seem out of reach or not even necessary for you to consider,
Yeah.
you start to consider, but then you end up thinking, what's this mess about? Be it anything to do with politics or history or the behaviors of people, or why do people, act in certain way? Why does this always happen? Why does that? You start to puzzle the pieces together
Hmm.
and, or at least make some sense of things. And as you do that, a lot of the fairy dust magic
Yeah.
evaporates.
Yeah. Well, not only that, but you start having to concern you start having to be an adult. When you're 16 years old, 15, 14, 13, you don't really look at what it takes to get car insurance. You don't look at interest rates. You just know this record come out and I want this record.
Yeah.
And that's about it. But it's not until you actually have to do that You know, when um, uh, the very first place my ex-wife and I rented, and we went down to the power company to get the power put in our name. We had no idea that at the time we had to put down a security deposit. Didn't know anything about it. I just thought, oh, okay, well, they're going to put the electricity in your name and you're responsible for the bills now. But I had no idea that there was a security deposit involved. I had no idea there was so much paperwork to fill out. And it kind of mystified me as to why this was happening. And at the time, it was the same for the phone company because we had never had an electric account with the electric company. We never had an account with a phone company. We didn't know there was any such thing as a security deposit. So we didn't know it was going to cost us money to get started, you know. And it was kind of strange things to figure out, especially when we were never told that that was even a possibility, let alone how much it was going to be. There are, what I guess what I'm getting at is some of these lessons that we now take for granted. You don't get taught this stuff in school for sure, and you don't learn it until you actually have to experience it,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah. There's those are little scenarios that you only acquire at the moment of
Mm-hmm.
necessity, but once you start piling up all these different things, um, I think that again the all that's the normal process of things, but my argument that I threw in was that something changed
Mm-hmm.
within the 2000s.
Well,
And
Steve
go ahead.
Steve agrees with you. He says that Halloween changed with the loss of innocence in society. Um, I won't argue that, but I guess it would have to come down to how you would define innocence in society. Because I mean, I heard my father talking about that in the '60s. I didn't understand what he meant, but this was about the time of the Summer of Love and the Berkeley riots and things like this. So we're looking at 67, 68, 69, around in that time when the Vietnam War protests were in their height. And it was a really messy time. Um, and he would talk about that. So I don't know. Did we ever really have innocence?
Yeah, we
Because
did.
I think all of us look back at our childhood with that nostalgic sense and that feeling of that's when the world was wholesome. But if we look back at the time, was it really all that wholesome? I think it was wholesome to us only because we didn't understand what we were seeing around us. We just knew that my bike's red and your bike's green. That's the way we tell them apart, you know, and, you know, your skateboard was this and mine was that.
It depends on how we measure things. You know how
Mhm.
we've talked in the past about if you're going to measure a rock or something, you have to have something to measure it
Against, yeah.
against, so that there's a sort of timeline, you
Right.
know. So this sort of conversation um, is based on some beginning point till now, but if you widen the scale to the 60s till now,
Hmm.
there is a certain progression. But what happens is here, all these things can be true at once. So if you
Yeah,
think
I
of,
agree with that there. I agree with you
well,
there.
if you think of the 60s till now,
Hmm.
that timeline, there's X number of generations that occurred through it,
Hmm.
but each generation from the 60s till now is a every generation born is a new start stop,
Hmm.
start stop, start stop. there's this large scale, and then within that, there's all these beginnings occurring. So within each generational beginning, be it if they were born in the 60s, 70s, 80s, whatever, that's their starting point and that's their journey beginning. But there's also this timeline that they're sitting
Mhm.
in with data before them and data that they're heading towards as it goes on. And so if you measure it from the 60s till now, you could say from the 60s till now, people are, broadly speaking, the world is like, for instance, I'll use one concrete example to assume what Steve was saying without knowing that this is more or less where he's going. We have so much availability of information on demand, and it's flung in our faces, um, with people competing for our attention in terms of what
Yeah.
we should believe or shouldn't believe,
Hmm.
be it in politics or any number of things. Um, that that wasn't the case back in the day in terms of the technology used as a
Right.
carrier.
Right.
So
Right.
people could get on with it back in the day, even though stuff was flown in their faces through the radio, TV, and
Well,
such. But well, let me finish my thought though. The even though that was the case then, there was ample room to get away from it all.
mm, yep. That's where I was going to go. Yeah.
Okay, well, on the other hand, one could get away from it all as well by what some people have argued here, maybe yourself as well. I think you could always turn it off.
Well,
But the turning off part is not that easy, because this is the mainframe that we use to access all entertainment, such and this and that. So it's kind of a
but that's the point. See, we most of us had jobs, so we had to turn it off. Now, if you had the type of job where you could have a radio playing out in the shop or something like that, or on a construction site, that was one thing. But if you worked most jobs, like I've worked restaurants and offices and things like that, where you couldn't have a radio and you were away from all of that stuff. And so get up in the morning, maybe the radio's playing or the TV's on and you're hearing the news or whatever, and you split, you get in your car, you got the radio going there. But the minute you walk in and punch in, you're away from all of that stuff.
that's right.
Now we take it with us everywhere we go. It's right here. We take it with us. We've got it right there. We've got 16 private messages coming in, and we've got a text from Aunt Judy saying, well, your Uncle Bob did this, that, and the other. Oh, okay, cool. You having barbecue tonight? Whereas we didn't do that when we were at work before. So all of those influences that you're talking about were selective at the time back then, because it was only when we were in a position to be exposed to that media. Now it's a constant barrage because we take it with us everywhere we go.
So
So there is a loss of innocence in that regard, in that
mm,
before we could tune it out a lot easier because we weren't always in a situation to have it to begin with.
so another side thing that at least I see a connection to it, but it's kind of a little bit out there. Um, but I'll mention it. Out there from what we're talking about, but it's not at the same time. At least in my mind, I can see a connection, but I don't know if I can make the argument properly. So I'll just throw it out there. Um, I've read. I take this as a grain of salt, but that different people see or experience time differently. So
In what way?
okay, so I'll explain. Um, so this connects with the theory of relativity, and Einstein suggested these things.
Okay.
So Um, your perception of time and my perception of time in our heads,
Mhm.
just like when we speak language, and even though we're speaking the same language, um, time is a construction that doesn't exist in reality. There's no so there's no, it's relative.
It is relative. It's relative to our time is relative to Earth and where we are on that Earth
Right. So like we do
on a
know that there's
macro level.
24. What's that?
On a macro level, that is. But yeah,
Yeah, well, we know that we have a ways of measuring time,
sure.
because we know that things go one after the other.
Hmm.
I'm here right now. I just
Right.
raised my hand.
Hmm.
Raising my hand came right after me not had raising, and
Right.
now I lowered it. So we know, and but we can't do that. We can't go back. We're
No.
always now. So basically, with Einstein and all that, is that if you take two people and 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 they're in different locations, um using light and this and that, like, it's not like I can make the argument perfectly, but the point is that from wherever our plot in this world is at, in our heads, there's a sense of time that we have,
Yeah.
and we use other people, or like the clock
Hmm.
and the sun and so on and so forth, um and it regenerates every 24 hours and so on.
Hmm.
And we know that we're moving forward, but within each of us. So, for instance, I guess I'll say it like this: Tuesday for you today may have been what you would consider a very quick day,
Hmm.
or a very long, dragged out day,
Yep.
depending on your or my.
And I was going to go there too, because perception is, in this case, perception is reality. In that, now there's a quote. I don't know who really said it. It's attributed to Einstein, but I can't find anywhere where he actually said it. But it's something like, if you spend an hour in good conversation, it goes by as a second. If you put your hand on a hot stove, a second seems like an hour. That's relativity.
Yeah, and Jim said it too. He says time goes faster as you get older.
It does seem to. I now get that line in the Pink Floyd song. Every
But
year is getting shorter, never seem to find the time.
but that that Jim said
Hmm.
is his perception
Yeah.
based on where he plots
Hmm.
in what, and other people could agree with him,
Hmm.
but that all depends from the inner, because there might be other, so we only exist from our camera angle,
Well, sure.
and what's inside our head.
Right.
And if you were to take someone, just to reinforce everything that you said, and actually with Jim, if you take a Jim right now and you place him in some lobby in some building, and okay, Jim, wait here, we'll come back and get you. Meanwhile, you and I, and Linda, and Steve, and everybody, we jump in a van and we go down to the local pinball machine arcade and
Hmm.
restaurant extravaganza thing. Um, the clock is telling us but in Jim's experience, likely maybe Jim
Yeah.
has a great old jolly time sitting
Mhm.
in that lobby in that building with
Yeah.
like maybe one janitor that's mopping around and doesn't want to talk,
Hmm.
without a cell phone.
Yeah.
Maybe time will, but I'm sure if I had to bet money, Las Vegas money,
It,
you
yeah.
get the point.
I do get the point. Who do you think experiences the faster time?
Yeah.
The person who is in the dentist chair, or the person out in the waiting room waiting for that person in the dentist chair?
No,
You know,
yeah.
you're in there, your stuff is being done, and you're talking to people and this and that and the other, and okay, open your mouth, we got to do this, all right, here, rinse this, that, and the other. Meanwhile, the person out in the waiting room tapping their toes. Maybe they're knitting a sock. Maybe they're watching the TV, reading the closed captions because they can't have the volume turned up. I mean, you're in there for the same amount of time, but it's going to either speed by or drag depending upon your perception of it and what you're doing at the time.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. And there's also unknown factors to me,
Mm-hmm.
but I've so the way we see the world is very different
Oh
from
yeah,
each other.
it's going to be.
There's no way that you see the world like I do
No, I can't.
in terms of the things that linger in my head
Mm,
as opposed to the things that linger in your head
right.
that you either by choice or no choice categorize in your mind as the way to see the ocean, the way to see the
Right.
even though we both see the ocean, but we both have reference points to the ocean that are unique to each of us.
Yeah.
And although we could agree using the English language and our past
But but
respective
I but I can't see it through your eyes and you can't see it through mine.
exactly. So if you gather all the different objects and concepts that
Mhm.
we both have for things around us,
Mhm.
be it things like politics or philosophy or a specific
Mhm.
point about philosophy
Right.
or the sun, reference points to the sun.
Mhm.
We may share a certain amount of reference points to the sun that
Mhm.
we can both agree on.
Sure.
Um, but then there's other things in there. I mean, we're conscious beings and there's always things going on. So, due to all that, basically, we're all our own cameras
Mhm.
filming the world around us.
Right.
And we may have different apertures and different this
Right.
and that. So, we're all viewing things that I can assume is the same thing for all of us out there in the world space around us. But
Mhm.
in our heads, we're the only experience view of the world out there that there is.
Sure.
And although this seems like not necessary to explain, there's a lot of people that don't consider these type of things out there. I don't know that, but I
Well,
have tried to have conversations where that's not even an option for them to think. So there just might be people out there that don't understand something similar to the fact that you're recording the world out there, but other people are doing the same. There's a whole thing going on that we can't quite grab onto and know,
mhm.
and we can definitely not know unless people explain it to us.
Exactly.
And even then, when someone explains something to you, you're not receiving the picture
No, you're not. And here's a
like
good exercise for it. Try to describe the color red without referencing something that is the color red. It's damn near impossible. Try to explain to someone left and right without them seeing you.
Mhm.
You know, uh, some you our perceptions are our own. There are some things that you have to see in order to know or feel or perceive in some way. But just to sit here with no, with your eyes closed and try to describe left from right, you can't do it without an outside reference,
Yeah, you
you
need
know,
something to measure or something
to compare it to.
to contrast. Yeah, to
Yeah,
compare.
absolutely. And no two
Without that,
people are going to see that the same way,
but
you know.
now here's the thing. There's a difference to whatever degree between a person that's aware of these things
Hmm.
and a person that's not.
Well,
There
sure.
are people that are not aware.
Hmm.
that they're aware of certain things. Um, so what's redundant? Damn it, a little gnat was just flying. So what's redundant? See the gnat seeing the world like, oh, I gotta land on this guy.
Yeah.
I just gotta land on this guy. I don't know
Yeah.
what. I mean, he might swap me away. I
Gee,
don't
your
know.
hair smells terrific.
I mean, worst decision than that could have made because,
Hmm.
frankly, but but anyways, the camera angle
Hmm.
of multiple cameras occurring and everything that's working inside that
Hmm.
is a universe unto itself. How people stack
Hmm.
what's important or how they see things or
Sure.
their
Priorities.
definition for things, even though we're using the similar language, the same
Hmm.
language actually, um, to communicate these ideas, it doesn't follow that, L. Ron Hubbard, um, talk about a curveball here.
Hmm.
L. Ron Hubbard had this book called Dianetics.
Never read it. Heard about it, but never read it.
I bought it back in the 80s
Hmm.
as a kid. I was so, I've always been more or less the way, it's just that now, I always,
He
I've
was
always
a good science fiction writer, but he was a piece of work. I'm here to tell you.
No, no, but I'm not trying to
Hmm.
put that out there. I'm trying to
Sure.
say that back in the day, I used to frequent the bookstores. I was
Hmm.
that kind of a kid
Hmm.
for some reason. I mean, I like the National Geographics
Yeah. Same here.
for the nudie shots and stuff. I'm telling you. Um,
Yeah.
but even though I had that little naughty boy in me,
Yeah.
um, that's not all that I look at books and this and that and buy books as a kid.
Hmm.
I should be, but I did.
Hmm.
Um, I don't. And I picked up Dianetics. I said, well, this is interesting as hell.
Hmm.
I think at the end, if I recall well, they, and to go further, you should end this and that. Like they tried to do the hook and,
Hmm.
but in one of the chapters, they talk about a dog
Hmm.
and a dog bit, I'm paraphrasing it, bit a person or was scared with the loud barking and someone was wearing something red and the person that saw the dog barking that got scared associated the color red with the barking, and so this combination. He was going into psychological things that actually exist outside of Dianetics,
Hmm.
but what L. Ron Hubbard was doing was incorporating psychological things within Dianetics
Yeah.
in order to. This is, let's put it this way. He was making a convincing argument using sources from outside,
Hmm.
making them his.
Yeah.
Okay, and buffoonery and this and that included, but that's not the point. The point is that it's quite logical to me
Hmm.
that if you have a traumatic experience at any given time, you will associate
Certain things with that experience. Yes, you will.
with that
You're right.
experience, and
Hmm.
then every time one or the other pops up, you will
Hmm.
look at onto it negatively.
Hmm.
So, for instance, I once ate a peach or a pear.
Hmm.
No, what was a mango? I once ate a mango,
Uh-huh.
and soon thereafter, I became terribly ill,
Hmm.
vomiting to the point that I had to rush to the doctor. And from that point on till today, I don't eat mangoes. I'll eat one, but like it's like the furthest thing. Whereas before, you know,
Hmm.
I'd eat them.
Yeah.
There's no rationale.
Sure, there is. I
No,
mean,
no, no.
you've heard the phrase once bitten, twice shy. It's kind of like if you reach down and you pick up, you burn yourself. You mentally, whether you know it or not, you've learned a lesson. Don't touch that. It's hot.
Okay, that's fine, but I agree. But my there's no rationale in that every other mango
Hmm.
is going to cause the same thing.
No, you're absolutely right on that, but you're cautious about it because you had an experience with it.
right? But it doesn't follow that if you eat a pizza if you ate a pizza sometime in 1982 and you got the shits,
Yeah.
that now all of a sudden that every pizza you eat, it might be the truth, but what I'm saying is that there's this association linked
Hmm.
with things
Yeah.
that, using that L. Ron Hubbard example,
Hmm.
that I would have, that you would have different
Hmm.
for countless other things that might not reach the level of fear,
Hmm.
but it could reach the level of preference over what nuts or not to eat, or what
I,
movies to like, or let me just get to the point. The point is that as we go throughout life, we are bridging connections,
sure.
and we're weaving
Hmm.
um, this intricate thing that we call our paradigm or our reality or our definition of what things
But
are.
I think it's perfectly normal, and I think it is perfectly logical that you would be slightly gun shy towards mangoes because you had that experience, even if it was when you were a little kid. I mean, there may be something within you that has an allergy. There may be something in the mango that you can tolerate a certain amount, but once you get past that amount, nope, two
Okay,
exits open, no waiting. I
okay,
mean,
I'm that may be true
mhm.
on a situational basis, but
But
I'm
all I'm
making a
getting,
broad. Go ahead.
yeah,
Go ahead.
I understand. All I'm getting at is I do see the logic in that. I,
Okay,
you know,
well, I'm making a broader
mhm.
case of that. Little by little, we're
Right.
making connections.
And I agree with that 100%.
Well, let me just say, across multiple topics
Hmm.
as we encounter them
Hmm.
across time, constructing a view of reality
Hmm.
that's unique to me
Hmm.
and that's unique to you. My weaving of this reality of what things mean, what wood means. Do I like cedar compared to this or that?
Hmm.
Do I like one type of soft drink or another? Whether or not my choices are based on a rational or irrational thing, or yours likewise, I've created a tapestry.
Hmm.
But that tapestry is quite different in significant ways than yours,
Hmm.
and yet at the same time might very well overlap in endless ways.
Oh yeah.
Taking those two different views of the world with overlaps involved,
Hmm.
using the English language that we use to communicate with each other, it is through that we're able to signal or send over information and back and forth. But once you've delivered your information to me, I'm receiving that recap of what you're trying to transmit.
Hmm.
But if we are not cautious, there's missed opportunities to understand exactly what the other person is signaling out. And if you compound that across humanity, it's a miracle we're even slightly functional. So, my point is that we assume that we exchange information, and that when if I choose a sentence, I'm actually offering you the best sentence to get my point across. That's why I extend it, because I'm trying to really get the essence of what I'm trying to say across. But here's the problem: no matter how much I try,
Yeah, you can't control what I hear, what I take in, what I
right,
reject, what I accept. And yeah,
right,
100%.
right,
You know, there's Steve says, and that overlap is what causes groups to like and dislike the same things.
yeah,
100%. Absolutely. It's those common things. And like, because like you were just talking about a little bit ago, that your view of America is Miami. centric because that's your experience.
Yeah.
And that's 100% logical. Now, there are commonalities that we have on how you grow up and how I grew up, even though there were 14 years of difference in between them and 3,000 miles of difference between them. Different regions, you have a completely different climate, you have a completely different way of doing just about everything than we do out here. Do you even own a sweater or a coat, a heavy coat?
I'm wearing thermal underwear as we speak. No, we do wear sweaters when it's cold enough,
Mhm.
so we'll have
Yeah,
a certain amount of that.
yeah, sure. But I bet you've never even put on a pair of snow boots
No,
and don't know what powder pants are. So we have completely different experiences, but we both know certain movies, we both know certain TV shows, we both know certain music, we both know certain foods. We both have this vision, we have this huge connection and a lot of overlaps going on in between. And that's the basis of all of this,
and
you
we
know.
speak the same language in order to even be able
Hmm.
to do this.
Yeah.
However, all those things you mentioned have subcategories where we would differ in our perception,
Hmm.
and just the English language, as I've
Hmm.
reiterated various times. Even though we're speaking English,
Hmm.
as Noam Chomsky once said in a video, putting his political things aside, which I can do to a degree, um, because he's a linguistics man,
Hmm.
but he's also a political commentator.
Yeah, he doesn't make it easy.
Right. But it doesn't follow, unless proven otherwise, that if a person is a doctor and also a poetry writing fanatic, that he's not a good doctor because he's a poetry guy,
Oh yeah, even a broken clock is right twice a day. Exactly.
or that his poetry is any good in any,
Hmm.
or that he's a better poet than he is a doctor. Like
You
there's
just open up another thought squirrel
well,
cage here, but go ahead.
let me just finish the Chomsky thing. He said that people assume that when they speak English, that there's one English language,
Yeah,
and he said that that's false.
yeah.
We think there is, but what there really is, there's this sort of vague construct that all people adhere
Hmm.
to that we call English, but every person speaking English
Hmm.
is speaking a specific English even unto themselves
Right.
according to how they express themselves. You may
Well,
think it's silly. People out there might
and
think it's
no,
silly,
and their experience as well.
but just to the letter of language.
Hmm.
The con Okay, so he explained, he went into it, but I'll just say this. When people out there are talking about whether something is good or bad, and you've talked about this too, whether something is good or bad English when it comes to like ebonics or like whatever or this or that, like maybe not ebonics, that's pretty, but just when it,
Texas slang.
yeah, yeah, because I'm going to extremes now so far, but even then you can make the argument. The purpose is communication. Anyways, he's suggesting within the world field of linguistics that no, that when people suggest that, oh, that's poor English according to the standards and so on and so forth. But the purpose of the language, and you may think that I'm pulling at this concept, but it's a solid concept, and it's what's behind it. We are communicating through our lens. There's some common threads tied to it for all of us, but we are, let's not underestimate, here I'll finish with this, let us not underestimate how much we are a camera with inner workings, and we're viewing the world out there, whatever that means, and every other person, whatever that means, is doing likewise. And it does not follow that we're actually perceiving
Well,
Even language in the same way. It's a miracle that I am saying this to you and everyone, and that hopefully it's not ill interpreted. But that hopefully is almost an impossibility for me to hope for
well,
because it's only coming from inside of me, and I have to depend on the English, the English language, and there goes one thing. If enough people said English, it would be English.
you're assuming they don't.
Yeah, but you get the point.
Yeah, I do get the point. And but you also have to count in experience because, for instance, you mentioned cold because I said sweaters and powder pants and heavy jackets and stuff like that. Your perception of cold is completely different from mine. And mine is completely different from Jim Dockrell's because we live in different regions. And what you think is cold, I might think is t shirt weather. And what I think is cold, Jim might think is still shorts and flip flops.
And,
So it depends on our experience.
and I'll add to that. When you just said that
Mhm.
internally, my mind right now said, "Well, I know what cold is. I know what you're saying, but I
Mhm.
have I have my reference, which is what you were saying. If I were pressed
Mhm.
to try to meet your level of cold,
Mhm.
well, I couldn't do it because I don't have your. I'm not sitting in
Right.
your driver's seat, but I could reference an extreme,
Mhm.
comparing it from one thing to the other when I was in Chicago, when I was in New York, when I was
Mhm.
in San Francisco,
Right.
and those are extreme from where I'm at. And you could
Right.
probably do the flip side of that when you
Yeah.
were in Georgia or or South Carolina, or or whatever.
And probably neither one of us can even fathom somebody who lives in New York or Chicago thinking those people in Canada are nuts. It's too cold up there. It's like
Right,
it's too cold up there. It's too cold where you are. You know you're free to go. You know.
right,
So I mean it's 100% perception.
right.
And you're 100% right. No two people will perceive the same thing in exactly the same way. I mean, you're okay, you're on the East Coast, so you don't see sunsets over the ocean. You see sunrises,
That's right.
right? But there are some spectacular sunrises. I'm sure you have seen some colors as the sun is just starting to come up that if you tried to describe them to somebody, they wouldn't believe you. The colors are just too vivid and too wow. And we've seen sunsets the same way. That if you tried to describe that to somebody, they wouldn't believe that you could see that.
Yeah,
But we both perceive it. Now, see, there's a difference right there because you're seeing that at sunrise if you get up that early. I'm seeing that every evening at sunset. I can't I can't take that reference to sunrise. I can't
yeah.
it doesn't compute to me.
Well, that
To
was
me, that's around dinner time, you know.
that's what I was gonna say, Mark. Because when you said that, because it reminded me, I made a video, and I know
Mhm.
I've told you this before, but I love it because it's so funny. It's like self-deprecating in a sense because I made a video because
Mhm.
one day I woke up before the sun it was just rising,
Mhm.
and the light coming in through my windows was like this deep orange.
Mhm. Yep.
And I was like, what's going on?
Mhm.
What is this? And I grabbed my film camera and
Mhm.
I stepped outside and I said, guys, I just woke up. And it
Look at
looks like
this. Yeah.
it looks like a Blair Witch Project thing where it's like all like I'm like like I was all freaked out. Guys, the sky is orange. And then I come to find out, yeah, well that's how the sky looks when you wake up before the sun rises down, man.
Yeah,
And so
that's every morning, dude. You just never get up that early.
yeah,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
but I filmed it and posted it online, and like
Mhm.
that's the first thing I film in the video. Hilarious. I was like, guys, look what I just discovered.
Yeah, really. Oh man, it's strange how that because that's another perception that was new to you,
Uh, let's be fair.
and
Let me
you've
be
lived
clear.
there all your life. I
No,
mean,
let's
you
be
know.
clear. I I I, I've had many a sunrise, but I'm saying for
Hmm.
that period of time,
Yeah.
it had not. had not been waking up prior to the sun rising,
Mhm.
and so when I
It
saw
had been a
that,
while.
right,
Yeah.
when I saw it, I was like, wow, this is incredible. Let me film it.
Mhm.
And so I am exaggerating the point, but at the same time, it looks that way in the video.
Uh-huh.
Like, the sky's orange, guys. So it does look that way. But
Mhm.
no, of course, I've seen sunrise. Right?
Sure. Well, it's kind of like when you go outside when you're in town. You're in the city, lights all over the ding dong place, traffic lights, lights from the stores, and then headlights from the cars, and this, that, and the other. You look up, it's kind of I don't know, you can see the moon, you can see a couple of stars, but you're missing so much. You go out into the country where there is no light, no ambient light. And for you, I'm guessing that would be just to drive out towards or drive into the Everglades
About 20 miles.
where you don't have a whole heck of a lot of ambient light. And you look up and it's like, holy cow. You can see all
Yeah.
kinds of stuff up there,
Yeah.
all kinds of stars.
Yeah. It's still, there's a little bit of dirtiness from the city,
Mm-hmm.
but you can definitely see much more.
Yeah. And but to somebody who's never lived in it, like we used to do this to the guys in the army all the time. New privates just come in, never been in the country, only lived in like New York City or Philadelphia or something like that. They really are mystified and just, I mean, because you're out in the field, you're with a bunch of other guys sleeping in tents, and you're sitting outside just kind of looking around, going, "Dang, no lights anywhere." And some of these people just kind of can't handle it almost. They hear every little noise that they're not used to hearing. What was that? Oh, probably a bird or a squirrel or something like that. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Even the sound of crickets is like, what the hell is that?
Well, when
Crickets,
I used
man.
to be in the Everglades, I'd stay there. Sometimes I wouldn't even go home. I just stay in one of the trailers or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And we used to be walking around in the freaking pitch dark, dude.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, is that you, dude? Yeah, it's me. Okay. And then you walk over.
Uh-huh.
Hey, what's going on, dude? And you're talking to someone in complete darkness. I mean, you can
Yeah.
see the shade, but that's not the
Yeah.
point. The point is that it's a whole different, world,
Yeah.
really.
Crickets and frogs making
Yeah.
noises in the background and all that other stuff. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I
I grew
mean,
up with that.
well, it was new
So,
to me,
mhm.
you know, and I was just 15 miles away from it.
Yeah. But then again, if you never leave, if you never bothered to travel that 15 miles, you wouldn't know it was there. You wouldn't know that that's even a thing, even a possibility.
Well, I used to think because I would drive out that way to go to
Mhm.
the other side of Florida,
Uh-huh.
but everything in between.
Yeah.
Because what happens is that um, you have Miami
Mhm.
or Dade County, and then as you go out west, it
Mhm.
becomes all Everglades, and it's all flooded with water. And there's one road,
Yeah.
and you don't get to land until Naples.
Mhm.
So you have 80 to 90 miles, and on either side is grass that's sitting on top of water.
Mhm.
But there are little stops along the way, but they're just hugging the road.
Yeah.
So one would assume that there's nothing going further in other than just more grass.
Mhm.
And that's true, but there's also land
Mhm.
and people
Islands
live
and what
in
have you.
those areas.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah. That's wild to think about. But you know what? They're kind of in the same boat because, and I'm not saying that they've never gone into town to experience that, but that's their reality of where they live out there. It's
yeah,
kind of like the folks that we knew in Nevada. They have lived in the desert their entire lives, where you either stake something down or you put it indoors, or the wind's just going to take it away. It's just gone.
yeah,
You know, everybody we knew that had a porch swing never put that little awning on the porch swing because they knew it would be gone the next morning when they went outside because the wind was so bad out there. They knew no other way. I used to tease my friends when we moved back up here from Nevada. I would, post on Facebook, look at this. We have rain. That's water that falls from the sky for free. You
yeah,
guys don't get that, that kind of thing. Just, teasing and what have you.
yeah.
But
We all
that
have our
was
experience.
That was their life and that was their experience. They're used to not going out during certain times of the day because it's just too damn hot, you know. Or they're used to being inside at a certain time because the wind kicks up and blows the alkali dust off the alkali flats and you can't see or breathe. So it's just a whole different experience. And, almost a mini culture of its own.
Yeah, they are. And there's plenty of those all across the country and the world.
Mm-hmm.
And we all see things in our particular way. But in any ways, to go back to the Halloween, I think that growing up as a kid, it was great. It might be great for kids now, but they wouldn't be able to judge my
No.
era. But as far as what I see in terms of numbers, it doesn't seem that there's a lot of kids out and about. We'll see what
Mm-hmm.
happens, but it doesn't look like it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and there's a lot of factors involved with that and stuff.
Sure.
But it was special. I used to love dressing up, and just to say, my grandmother, maternal grandmother, seamstress,
Mm-hmm. Oh, wow.
she did all my costumes up to a point,
Mm-hmm.
all my life.
Mm-hmm.
So I was Batman, I was Superman, I was a pirate, I was for some reason I was a doctor. I was also an accordion player for some reason.
Mm-hmm.
I was an Arab, and
Mm-hmm.
my suit was this very shiny, a golden what do you
Turban.
call those? Huh?
Turban.
Turban. It was a golden turban, and the red pants that were all I guess,
Ballooned. Yeah.
yeah. And it was always that. And then I remember one Halloween where the popular thing was the plastic suits,
Yeah.
and I opted for that. And instead of, no, I want the plastics, and it was a spider.
Mm-hmm.
So I had this thing that was a big inflated thing on my head with
Uh-huh.
legs sticking out,
Yeah.
and this plastic garbage bag around me. And it was like the worst thing, but for some reason I thought it was cool. Look, I'm a spider, but it was this
Mm-hmm.
plastic garbage bag.
Yeah. More or less. Yeah.
But it was great
Well,
for me at the time. Those were fun things.
but when I was little, that was those plastic outfits. They had that one wear you could wear at one time, vinyl outfit that had like a drawstring on the back. Wasn't even a drawstring, it was sewn on.
Yeah.
And you wore the plastic mask with the elastic around the
Mhm.
back of your head. And that was about it to your costume. And they had Bugs Bunny and they had Charlie Brown and they had all that other good stuff, whatever.
My super
Casper the Friendly Ghost or whatever.
my grandmother, the Superman suit that she made.
Hmm.
What's funny about it? Like looking back, by the time I'm into Superman,
Hmm.
it was the 1980s movies starring
Hmm.
that guy, the handsome guy,
Oh, Christopher Reeve.
Christopher Reeve.
Hmm.
But he had a different suit than the 1950s Superman.
Yes,
But my grandmother's reference point
was 50s.
was 50s. So I ended up with the 1950s Superman look.
Well,
Freaking awesome. Well,
I was
no,
gonna say ain't nothing wrong with that. Yeah, but
no, I'm saying, but I'm thinking back on it, and
mhm.
I'm just saying that I realize that now. Her reference point was the 1950s
Mhm.
Superman.
George Reeves.
So, you know, that's another thing. Oh,
Mhm.
grandma, I want to be Batman. Batman coming up,
Adam
1950s,
West.
1960s Batman instead of the 1980s. And so stuff like that. And so those,
Yeah.
and it goes on and on and on
Okay.
with
Now, which one of those that she made for you? Which one of those do you think your to this day is your favorite?
um I like the attention she was, so I don't have a favorite. I like the fact that she left me with that memory.
Well, I do understand that, but I mean,
I don't have a
think,
favorite.
think you don't have a favorite, really? I mean,
No.
the first one that popped into your brain was Superman, so that must have it be a little
Okay,
bit
I'll tell
special.
you my favorite. One of the last costumes she made,
Hmm.
I wanted to be, because at that time ninjas were all the fad.
Oh yeah. Okay.
And I said, I want to be a ninja. So she looked at images of ninjas,
Hmm.
and for some reason, I wanted to be a forest ninja.
Okay.
I don't know why that was cool in my mind.
Hmm.
Maybe it's just because all black. It's like,
Hmm.
so it became camouflaged.
Hmm.
So I had the whole ninja, and it was perfectly everything ninja. And I remember, unfortunately, I can't get all the details out of my mind,
Sure.
but I remember that there was a news broadcast that was going to be filmed in front of um, the Barefoot Mailman store
Hmm.
in the mall, and I took that costume, and my mom took me because she worked there.
Hmm.
I'm trying to piece it together. She found out that there was going to be a kids thing for the news,
Hmm.
and to bring your kids so they can show up on the news. And I did one, and then I pop out of the store, and I'm like,
Yeah.
and so I came out on the news on that. But I can't pull all the details, but I can remember me there, my mom in front of the store. And by the way, the store, the Barefoot Mailman, which I've talked about before, was a novelty shop
Hmm.
that sold prank stuff
Hmm.
alongside with memorabilia and gag stuff and masks and knives and all that
Costume
kind of stuff.
stuff and what have you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, for several years, my youngest daughter and her husband, they ran a costume shop, and my daughter made a lot of the costumes, and she also learned how to do theatrical makeup and got very good at it. And she used to dress my youngest granddaughter up in various costumes and what have you. And the makeup that they did was just mind blowing. But because, her husband is an artist, and I mean, oil paints, and then also in digital and all this other good stuff, and just draws and cartoons and what have you. But so she always had killer costumes.
That's awesome.
And so Halloween was always their absolute favorite holiday because of that. The masquerade, the costuming, the time to do makeup and just, let it run wild. But, if my granddaughter wanted to be a gypsy, she was a by God gypsy. If she wanted to be the queen of the Nile, she was by God the queen of the Nile,
Yeah.
because everything was right there. And I mean, they just still to this day, Halloween is their holiday, and that's all there is to it.
One of the things, and I know these are repetitive themes that pop up,
Hmm.
but talking about childhood and then Halloween and stuff, there was a store, and in Spanish, I'll say it in Spanish and then I'll translate it, was in the Little Havana section of Miami, and it was one of the many businesses, Cuban-owned businesses, from back in the day, from the exile community, and it was called in Spanish, La Casa de los Trucos,
Hmm.
the house of tricks.
Tricks, okay.
So it was a gag store, novelty, just the
Hmm.
same costume store and whatnot.
Yeah.
And that, along with other little stores owned by mostly Cubans overwhelmingly, even at that time, back in the day, even before my time,
Hmm.
when they came here, they quickly scrambled and began to open up businesses, take out
Yeah.
loans. Like everything they had in Cuba, they tried to, and did successfully to a degree, well, to a great degree, reproduced everything here. So they basically transferred Cuba over here
Yeah.
in the ways that they culturally understood, and at the same time, they inputted American culture, and that's what I result in. Let's say,
Hmm.
um, others more so than not.
Yeah.
But when I think of those little stores in the Little Havana area that I frequented as a kid, that I'm observing,
Hmm.
these are my points of reference that I'm being offered. I had no say in it.
Yeah.
I'm viewing the world as I'm unfolding. Um, One of the things that is incredible to me, just to think on, just like the Indian burial mounds that were found in Miami that they want to do high rises on,
Hmm.
we are a society walking on top of previous societies.
Yeah.
But in a microcosm of that, when I think of my Miami, there's people walking around the cityscape that have no points of reference to what came
Right.
before
Right.
at all.
Right. And you run into that. You will run into that every single day. And in that, especially in our case, because you and I are similar in this regard, in that we basically are where we grew up. You know, you living in the house that
Literally.
you grew up in, literally, and me being within a few miles of the various houses that I grew up in, or that I spent my summers in
Yeah.
until I married and went into the army. So we've seen the change, some of it big, some of it small. And explaining to someone how it didn't used to be that way, or what used to be here, or, well, like for instance, there are two high schools in Medford, the big city I'm closest to. My whole life there was one, because there weren't enough students to need two high schools. There was one high school. Both of my grandkids went to the new high school that they just built, but they also went to the junior high school that my parents went to. So you had that little bit of a juxtaposition there, in that they went to the junior high school that my parents went to, but then they went to a high school that didn't exist 20 years ago.
Right.
And that's how much things change. I mean, where they lived used to be a pear orchard. And trying to let them know that, yeah, right down the block from where you are right now was that's the whole side of that road there was pear orchard, and on the other side was a cherry orchard that you would walk in, they'd write down your name, you'd go pick cherries, and then you came out, they would weigh the cherries and you paid for them by the pound. But you chose the tree, you climbed the ladders, and you picked the cherries. And now it's nothing but houses out there. They can't even fathom what that would have been like.
Yeah.
You know,
Mhm.
I'm not saying that it's better or that it's worse. It's just different. And they're like, well, why is this road a one-way street? Well, this is why it's a one-way street, because you had this and you had that, and you had the other. So it was needed back then. It's not really needed now, but it was when they did it. A lot of it had to do with, believe it or not, bus traffic in the middle of town. Well, they closed down the bus station. Greyhound doesn't even stop here anymore. So one way street where the bus station used to be is no longer necessary, but it's still one way.
Yeah. I mean, it's a progressive thing. You know, but I feel that from my perspective, walking the same, like walking by the bridge, knowing that it was moved,
Mm-hmm.
knowing that kids used to jump off it
Yeah.
when it was in its original location, knowing that I used to drive over it with my dad to
Mm-hmm.
go to the Home Depot or to, the Indian cigarette shop down in at the brim of the Everglades,
Yeah.
or towards the Burger King, like just back and to and
Mm-hmm.
fro from Little Havana over. It was the choice bridge.
Mm-hmm.
It was the choice bridge to get into Sweetwater.
Yeah. The main drag, basically.
And seeing it now,
Mm-hmm.
as I walk by it and I watch kids walking over it, um, they have no no idea. I mean, even one of the buildings, I went into one of the shops, the new building, and I got to talking with the guy and said, you know where we're standing right now, right here, right here where you're standing. There was a bar with a pool table, and it was raggedy inside. It looked like something out of a movie.
Hmm.
Right here where we're at, and the guy's just looking at me like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Um, I mean,
They have no frame of reference. They don't know what you're talking about. Yeah.
right, but you're occupying spaces that used to be something else,
Hmm.
and it's an incredible thing, and
Yeah.
people have no idea what you're carrying with you because it's in your own recorder.
Hmm.
So when you run across someone, they have no idea of all this background. They just see a guy. Maybe the guy's in their way. Get out of my
Hmm.
way. I've got a shopping cart. I'm coming through, or whatever. And this
Hmm.
happens vice versa.
Hmm. Well, I got
Uh,
my shopping cart too, and you're in my way. So,
well, and the things and concepts and histories that they have. So we're only just as aware as well, in our particular cases, but I know this area
mhm.
in certain very specific
Same
ways.
here.
But um, even that, there were things that came before me here,
Hmm.
um, and with those and I got a tail end of that
Hmm.
as a kid.
Yeah.
But then all those people, either started passing or moved to other parts of the country. Um,
Hmm.
but there was something that came before that, to
Yeah.
the point going back in time, as far as we can tell, that there were Indians,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's just an amazing thing to. So I like history in those terms, and it is a nostalgic thing to, up to your point, but to peer back past where you can,
Hmm.
where you have to dig out photos that
Yeah.
are out there historically
Yeah.
and have placement for that. That's so awesome too. I like that.
Well, you're a member of a group that focuses on your area's history, right?
Yeah, broadly South Florida.
Well, I'm in a group also that has to deal with the history here in the Rogue Valley. And every once in a while, I get a reality check because I can only go by my perception since I was born. But sometimes I find myself looking at a picture and going, well, I don't remember that. Then I take a closer look at it. Well, hell, no wonder it was 1925, you know.
Yeah.
So sometimes I find myself falling into that trap of not realizing, well, you know what, dude, there was a history. There were people here in a history before came along. Quit being so egocentric, you know.
Yeah, it
And
does give you that. It gives you a
mhm,
little bit of awe and a sense of
mhm.
humility.
You ever seen a picture of something that you knew was there, but it's not the way you remembered it?
I can't think of something right now, but
For instance, there was a picture somebody posted of downtown, and for some reason I don't know why I thought one store was on the other side of the street from where it actually was. And searching my brain, I still can't place it on that side of the street
oh, okay,
because
I have,
because in my memory it's always no, it was over there next to Newberry's, and well, no, it's clearly right in this photo. It's across the street from Newberry's, next to the Woolworths. Oh, okay.
So there's a picture of, when Miami,
Hmm.
when you reach the bay, like downtown Miami,
Hmm.
there's a river called the Miami River,
Hmm.
and it goes from the bay, downtown Miami. It opens up into the bay,
Hmm.
into the Atlantic, and it goes inland, way far inland,
Hmm.
until it breaks into canals and such and this and that.
Yeah.
But it used to be all the way into the Everglades,
Hmm.
and the Miccosukees and Seminoles used to get on their canoes,
Hmm.
take their products,
Hmm.
and they'd canoe all the way to the mouth of the river
Hmm.
to Miami downtown,
Hmm.
and they'd sell
Hmm.
to the people, the European settlers there.
Okay.
And I saw a picture,
Mhm.
early 1900s, maybe 1800s, and the mouth of the river today. By the way, the mouth of the river has huge skyscrapers on both sides. There's bridges. It's freaking
Mhm.
lit up. It's all it's freaking. You are in the modern age, but in that photo, it's a wilderness
Mhm.
and a water outlet
Yeah.
with trees and brush. And I think there's even a tugboat type thing at one side, and
Mhm.
it's grainy, full
Yeah.
of vegetation. It was a wilderness,
Mhm.
and the contrast is incredible.
Yeah. Yeah. I see pictures like that all the time. I mean, it's hard to even. I was getting an oil change one day. Right across the oil change place was right across the street from the big mall. We have one mall here, Rogue Valley Mall. And one of the oil change guys, I was standing out in front of the place. They were working on the car, doing whatever they were doing at the time. And he came out break time. He came out to smoke a cigarette. Oh, you been around here long? Dude, I'm so local. I tell people I'm so local, I'm related to myself.
Yeah,
Just kind of a joke because literally I'm serious. My dad was born three quarters of a mile from where I'm sitting right now. I'm that local. And I said, yeah, I've been here for a while. I remember when before this mall was here, it was a gravel lot for about 10 years. And before that, it was a lumber yard. He said, that was a lumber yard. Yeah. You know, and it has been built up. It wasn't that high. You used to stand on Riverside Drive on the sidewalk there and look down into the lumber yard. They built it up. Wow. I'm like, yeah. I mean, this entire area has changed. This whole end of town, this whole corner. And I'm pointing to different buildings. Over there used to be a shopping center. Nothing there anymore. Now there's a Whole Food Market and um, a, a Burger King, I think. Maybe it's Jack in the Box. I don't remember, but there's a little fast food joint there now. And they took out an entire shopping center to build that supermarket and that fast food joint. And it is like, wow, things have changed that much. Oh yeah, that
yeah,
that whole area, you have one highway that kind of makes a curve, then you have another highway that joins in, and it dead ended on that highway, and they called it the Big Y. So if you told somebody you were going to some place and it was down on the Big Y, they knew where you were talking about. Well, they have since added on to that highway that joins the other highway, and it now goes beyond. So now it's more of an X than anything else. But the old locals still call that area the Big Y. But none of the younger crowd has any idea why, because they have no frame of reference for that area.
yeah.
So, I
Let me
mean,
tell you
go
the
ahead.
well. Let me tell you this. It's adjacent to this, but whatever. I found it funny. So Miami has a lot of people in it.
Mhm.
There's people that have been here for a very long time. I've been here for a very long time.
Mhm.
All things considered, according to my age, there's people that have been here longer according to their age, let's say.
According, yeah, of course.
But within that, there's a ton of people that are like freshly here,
Yeah.
be it from within other parts of the country or from South America,
Mhm.
the Caribbean, everywhere else, Europe, everywhere.
Well, you being right there at the university, they're from all over the world.
Yeah, but and you can go anywhere in Miami and you'll find that. But we
Mhm.
have a specific university thing.
Mhm.
But there's a lot of people here from other parts of the world. There's people that have relocated maybe 10 years ago,
Yeah.
maybe just yesterday, maybe 20 years ago, but I'm still have been here longer than that.
Right.
But in any event, let me go to the thing. And there's other people that have been here longer than me. But the point
Sure.
is that I've always been here.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of influx of people that have not always been here. So it's not like they're local necessarily, although they're local now.
Mhm.
Um, when it comes to the humanity of it,
Mhm.
well, now they're Miamians. That's it.
Yeah.
But that history thing, that's another question. Okay. My cousin, which has been here all his life, younger cousin,
Mhm.
one day was driving. And remember, this is a busy town.
Yeah.
And I don't know what happened as he's driving, but this other guy, a Spanish guy from who knows where, Spanish speaking, sticks his head out the window to my cousin that's been here all his life,
Mhm.
and he says, "If you're coming to America, you better learn how to drive." He screamed out the window, and and my cousin was like, he was so shocked because he's like, this guy, like he knows, like when you
Mhm.
know, like
Yeah.
when you're from a place, you know.
Yeah.
Like, hey, I'm from here. Who are you?
Mhm.
Like it's not right to. It's an internal dialogue. Like,
Yeah, it is. Dude, my Oregon driver's license is older than you are.
yeah. Well,
Bite me.
so my cousin, but then he later told the story. He
Mhm.
says, but this guy, who he just arrived here, like more likely than not. Not
Mhm.
that that's bad or good, but the point is that he
Yeah.
had the gall
Mhm.
that now he's been here in the United States X amount of to stick his head out the window and
Mhm.
yell two or three choice words to my
Yeah.
cousin. He has no idea who he's talking to,
Mhm.
and he referenced him. Hey, if you're gonna be in this country, you better learn how to drive. When that applies to you, sir,
Yeah,
but
you're gonna
so
be in my state, you better learn some manners.
but here's the funny bit about that in my mind. Apart from that,
Mhm.
is that that's another quality of the United States. And what is it? That when people come here, no matter what, the broad assumptions, such as that, hey, I'm American.
Mhm.
Maybe I'm American now. Learn how to drive, dude. Like,
Yeah.
like all the Americanisms, all
Yeah.
of a sudden are adopted into the incoming people. And I think this is the process of the assimilation thing that we talk about every now and then,
Mhm.
which is an ongoing process because it's always continuous. And in Miami, it's always. But I found
Mhm.
it hilarious, in the context of that, and you really don't know who the hell you're talking to in this big
No, you don't.
city because there's people from everywhere.
And it can go in 15 different directions at once. You know who Paul Rodriguez is, right? The comedian, Paul Rodriguez?
Yes, from California.
Yeah. His parents came from Mexico,
Yeah,
and he grew up in a Spanish speaking home, but he speaks very, very good
he's
English. I
East
mean,
LA.
East
Something East
LA.
LA. Yeah.
Yeah. He tells a story about he was somewhere in town and he was on an elevator with two people. He says, I think they were Vietnamese. And they were speaking in Vietnamese, just talking as fast as his grandmother does in Spanish. And he says, and I finally figured out why you white people think that way. I finally fell into that same trap. And I finally had to say something. I'm like, hey, you're in America now. Speak Spanish, you know. And of course, the audience died laughing. But he said that he finally related to where these people could be talking about me. They could be talking about the weather. I don't know. But for some reason, it cheeses me off. You know?
Yeah, because we end up having a feeling of we have the right because we've been here.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we end up with that feeling, like, kind of, I was expressing that now. However, I did inject the limit to that,
Yeah.
because I try to be considerate of the fact that that position of mine, which is valid to me, because it's true. I've been here forever.
Yeah.
Okay, but that doesn't give me a right over.
Yeah. Well, you get possessive because that's your childhood home. And it's like, no, damn it, don't ruin my little town. Don't ruin but who am I to say somebody has to put up with my perception?
Exactly. There is something to be said about these things.
Hmm.
But the there I'm aware of the limit. Like,
Hmm.
I'll say this because this is an interesting. But I'll just say, um, when I was putting up the house for rent
Hmm.
years and years ago, um, there were some kids that I knew that they were going to um, rent it.
Hmm.
They were just curious to do the walk around.
Yeah.
And there was a couple from India that came through too.
Mhm.
Likewise, it just didn't matter, but it doesn't matter to me. I escorted them in, gave them the full tour and stuff, and I did so with the students. Um, I felt, I could be wrong because it's all in my head, but
Mhm.
because of the era of that visit and all these different things, and the students coming in and this and that, I felt that there was a possibility, at least, that they were checking for discrimination. Again, this is
Yeah.
in my head, and it's according to the
Mhm.
variables of the time.
Yeah.
In other words, oh, we don't rent to you or this or that, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
That thought crossed my mind because it didn't look like they were interested, that they were going to really like. It didn't look, but I don't know that, but
Mhm.
it didn't look. Um, and I escorted them right into the whole thing and this and that, and they were, oh yeah, okay, this and that. I said, hey, so if you're ready to leave a deposit, this and that, and said, oh no, and they left. So it's like you
Yeah.
wasted my time, actually, buddy. But here's the thing, um, one has, at least in my mind, one has to do the proper thing. Obviously, you can't
Sure.
risk it if somebody, like I had one couple, they were bald headed,
Mhm.
man and female, dressed in white,
Mhm.
and they were Cuban. Um, they belong to a religion
Mhm.
that's that uses mysticism and like all sorts of like voodoo type,
Yeah.
close near to that. I was like, and I also allowed them to walk in and explore. And the guy stood on my front porch, and he looked out into my yard with the trees and such, and he looked and he says, "This is perfect." And what the first thought that, so these people do animal sacrifices,
Oh, go.
and the first thing that came into my mind is that that's perfect for their sacrifice rituals.
They're going to be roasting goats in the backyard. I can't be doing this.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm like, no, I don't think so in my mind. So there, you have to deal with the situation at hand.
Mhm.
But um, these are people coming in, and they're human beings. They
Mhm.
don't have your long-standing this, and that.
Yeah.
But it would be incorrect of me, according to my education, and by education I mean upbringing, not necessarily scholastic like,
Mhm.
but ethics,
Mhm.
and all this
Sure.
and that. That my indignation stops at where my rights stop,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
my ability to lay that, to remove someone's, you know um free moving around
Yeah.
my neighborhood ends with just my opinion.
Yeah.
But
Absolutely.
that's not the case for a lot of people. For
No.
a lot of people, they do get possessive, like you were explaining.
And that is so sad in a lot of ways. I mean, possessive is one thing, and nostalgia and maybe quote unquote longing for the good old days, that's one thing. But to actively do something, to me, is crossing, that's crossing the line.
Or make
You know,
someone
I'm a
uncomfortable.
yeah, exactly.
Because
I'm a recovering real estate agent. And I did a lot of that. What you're talking about, showing your rental and everything else to people, that was my life. And it would be 8, 10, 12, 14 houses, in a day, with some clients. I had one pair of clients who must have looked at 30 houses easily, you know, in 4 different towns around here locally before they finally found one that they liked, that dotted all the I's and crossed all the T's. And, but when you walk into a place, if you weren't the listing agent, you don't know what you're walking into. And you don't know what your clients, you kind of have an idea what they're looking for. That's why you chose this house to show them. But you still don't know what you're walking into, and you still don't know what they're going to think about it. And I found that even, I won't say, well, it's probably right on par. They were of equal importance, not only the house that they were looking at, but the neighborhood as well, the
Yeah.
houses around.
Yeah.
And if there was something they didn't like for whatever reason, you know,
That was that.
then that was it. I mean, it could be the absolute perfect house, but if it was in the bad place, according to them, then forget it, you know. So you had to be aware of a bunch of things. And I used to tell people, I didn't ask them. I said, okay, I wouldn't ask them, what are you looking for? I would just flat out say, I know for a fact that it's easier for you to identify what you don't like and what you don't like than it is what you do like. So I need to know, what's a deal breaker? Stairs, two-story house, um, square footage, age, acreage, how much land. Tell me what you don't want so I can eliminate that. And then we could start working toward what they did want if they knew. Because you never know. Somebody might come in and see a big old huge brick wall with a rock fireplace and think that was absolutely gorgeous, and somebody else might think that's hideous. Well, we don't want a fireplace. Okay, so that just eliminated 6 from my list.
Yeah, and that's a
You
good
know.
point, Mark, because um, you can transfer that taste in structures in real
Mhm.
estate to cultural things based
Right.
on any number of different
And that's where I was getting ready to go, because I had a couple of people try to put that in on me. Well, we don't want to be around this type of people. And I was like, well, I can't work with you because I don't, number one, I don't think in those terms. So I don't want to work with somebody who does. And to me, that's just the most important. And I was told many times by my managing broker that he would back me 100%. If you feel uncomfortable working with somebody for any reason, you always have the right to say, no, I can't help you. And if that isn't good enough, there's another real estate agency down the street.
yeah,
Some
yeah,
people just send up red flags, and some people were just the nicest people in the world to work with. But, there are certain things even I wouldn't do.
yeah. I mean, well, I'll mention this one thing. The There was a particular rally,
Mm-hmm.
and it's made all the news, and I ran across it because it's everywhere,
Mm-hmm.
where a comedian was put up to do some sort of ribbing and this and that,
Mm-hmm.
and they mentioned something about Puerto Rico, where
Mm-hmm.
they said that, I think the joke was something to the effect of, "There's a floating garbage island, and it's called Puerto Rico," and it
I
was
never heard that.
and it was in a rally, in a
Uh-huh.
particular rally,
Mm-hmm.
and it's reverberated. So yeah, I ran across it. I clicked on it to see it, like last night. I said, "What's this? Offensive slur, blah blah blah, towards a community, blah blah blah, this and that." And I clicked on it because it was at a particular rally in the news of
Mm-hmm.
what's political today and
Yeah.
recently. And I heard the thing, and I just sat there, and I could, and a comedian stood in a political rally and said
X.
exact
Yeah.
exactly that. That, hey, there's
Mm-hmm.
a thing, and but he started it with, "Hey, how many of you Latinos are with us tonight?" And the crowd went, "Yeah!" And then he proceeded to call Puerto Rico a garbage floating island, and I was like, "Is this real?"
Real? Yeah.
I could not believe it, and the reverberations on that have been, it's like massive. Um, it was in poor taste, but I want to attach this thing to it. When people are of a particular category,
Mm-hmm.
based on a nation, based on whatever category,
Yeah.
um, from our vantage point here, there's a lot of people that don't necessarily make connections because they're not aware.
Mm-hmm.
But I found it shocking. So
Yeah.
I'll just say this: that Puerto Ricans, unlike Cubans
Mm-hmm.
or any number of countries, In fact, it's one of like three, I think, because there's um, American Samoa and like American Guam or something like that.
Guam, yeah.
Puerto Rico is one of those three.
Hmm.
Those people,
They're U.S. possessions, but they're not states. Yeah.
they're not states, but they're possessions.
Hmm.
Um, and those people, the Puerto Ricans, if they're on the island, they can't necessarily vote for X, Y, and Z. But if they're here, it's as if U.S. citizens. They're in fact they can freely go to and fro
Yeah.
without any of the and that's been that way for 100 plus years
Yeah.
due to U.S. involvement to begin with.
Hmm.
So these people are Americans. They may
Yeah.
not be, um, but here's what I was getting at is that this guy made a joke that wasn't funny in my opinion. It may be funny for some people, but there was no punchline. It was just a comment
Hmm.
in that scenario. And he prefaced it also with that who are all these Latinos coming into our country? Language like that,
Yeah. I got no
it's
use for people like that.
it's bad, but here's the thing that with a little historical knowledge, but it's not the commonplace.
Hmm.
These Puerto Rican people, I'm have no attachment to Puerto Rico that I'm aware of. I do have cousin matches because
Hmm.
it's the Spanish world, and that
Sure.
the people coming to and fro and this and that, and but I haven't made connections yet because I don't know, but I'm sure somewhere
Yeah.
there's a connection somewhere. But these Puerto Rican people have fought in every war since
Hmm.
the 1900s,
Yeah.
and prior to that, actually, before it was even connected to the U.S.,
Hmm.
Puerto Rican people fought in the freaking revolutionary American Revolutionary
Yeah.
War. But this comedian guy and broad consensus of American cultural understanding of what's what is so limited in a historical sense and a categorical sense that stuff like that occurs. But stuff like that is, well, it's ignorant and it's based on assumptions that are not true. You see what
Well,
I'm saying?
I,
And
I
go ahead.
I just don't get it. I mean, I really don't. This is 2024. This is not 1924. You know what? What part of a person's being tells them that that's okay?
It's lack of education
I don't believe that
or
because there's.
upbringing.
I don't believe it may be upbringing, but I don't
Yeah.
believe it's lack of education because there are some very highly educated people that believe the same thing. I don't think it's a lack of education. I think it's lack of character, is what I think it is. I think it part of it is upbringing. I think you're right about that. But there is, you can't blame everything on your upbringing. You know, at some point, you have to take responsibility for your own actions, your own thoughts, and for certain what you say in public. But
Well, it
I just don't get what makes people think that that's okay.
it's a scummy. So imagine a soldier, and there were many of them that were Puerto
Mhm.
Rican, as an example,
My
that fought
platoon sergeant was Puerto Rican.
and died in
Hmm.
things like Vietnam,
Hmm.
as an example, under 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 the U.S. flag,
Hmm.
and you have this certain amount of people out there that find it funny enough. I think it's most generally of it is lack of 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 understanding the history, and then
Well,
there's the bias that comes attached with ignorance over details.
but
That's what I think.
but he You know, you could say you're a comedian. You know to read your room. Read the room. If they don't like jokes about unions, you don't do any union jokes. If it's a pro this direction group, you don't do jokes against that direction. You read the room and you tailor your act towards that. He flat out said, "Well, where are all my Latinos at?" And they all, "You he knew going into that joke what he was lining himself up for.
Yeah.
I don't think you can put that down to ignorance. It wasn't said without fair warning that you're probably going to cheese off a percentage of this audience here.
Well, but the key is that his joke is one of the cultural hangers on
I
over group this and group that, group American and group other people that are suspect at best and inappropriate at work.
I just see that as a lack of character on the individual.
But it's a cultural thing because
But
it's not one individual.
no, you may be right in that. Well, yeah, you're definitely right in that it's not one individual. But I still think it's just I think some people are just bad people and
Well,
have
my
bad thoughts.
my bigger point to it was that these people are American. They're Puerto Rican. They have a different story than someone in
Well, they're not
Boston.
of my tribe, so therefore I can say, no, you can't. No, you can't.
They're broadly of our tribe,
Right.
but broadly, and specifically as well. But like so so one of the problems is attaching heritage with
Hmm.
Americanism.
Yeah,
You know,
I will agree with you on that because there are still a lot of backward thinking people on that score as well.
there
Because,
it
you have,
seems
huh? Oh, yeah.
it
Well,
seems
it's
that way.
absolutely the truth. But because, you have yourself of Cuban, Italian, and Spanish and Canary Islander and everything. So, you know, and then you have our friend Doc Hildebrand, who's of Italian heritage, and you have me, who's Scottish, English, and a couple of other issues in there that I'm not even 100% certain on yet.
Mhm.
But can anybody sit there and say, well, this person is more American than this person? No, you can't.
You
The
can
whole, I mean, I can go down, if you really want to get technical about it, I can go back to my great 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 grandmother who was Lakota and say she's the true American and all the rest of us are imported goods.
yeah.
But that doesn't line up with reality,
No,
you know.
reality is the reality is that to a degree, there's many parts to it, but there's that you're saying that it doesn't align perfectly. But the problem is that because of the natural progress of time with certain ideas and concepts, and plus the lack of family education in terms of ethics and
Yeah,
such and this
and
and that.
I think you can put a lot of it to that.
Yeah, and then there's the lack
But
of education about history, and so if you combine all things together, um, you have that. But my bigger point is, or at least point is that happened. I'm gonna be honest with you. I was shocked.
yeah, I would be too.
I
I
was
didn't even
shocked.
hear it and I don't like it.
I was shocked due to the circumstances in which it was done.
Hmm.
In that it was in a
Well,
political rally,
the whole
and
thing is just 100% unnecessary.
now it was no, but it left me like, okay, because here's the thing, now it's
Hmm.
become a football,
Well, of course, it will.
and there's people excusing it that shouldn't excuse it
Right.
when they should just say, okay, look, that was crap, and let's forget
Yeah.
about that, or it
You
was
know,
wrong and
that
here.
that dude's gone. He's not. He doesn't represent anything that we're stand for. Yeah,
Exactly, as opposed to saying, get your Kleenex and wipe your tears. You're all, or you're
that's a
none of
bunch of
you,
BS.
or none of you are going to vote anyways.
That's a bunch of B.
But here's the thing: by doing that, you're not serving the cause you think that you're, or the supposed cause.
Well,
Everything has to be fair and square. You have to give the dues to where
well,
the dues are deserved.
not only that, you have to take responsibility. You were the bus driver. No, you didn't um, run the red light and cause the accident. Your bus got hit by somebody who did run the red light, but you're still the bus driver. That don't mean that the minute the bus comes to a stop, you're the first one that bails out. You got to see to the safety of your passengers. You have to be responsible for
When
your actions, and
well, look,
and
what a lot.
the actions of those that you're around you that you're in charge of.
Well, but that's the thing, that just what you said when you were talking about ancestry and stuff, where you said,
Hmm.
well, if you go back and there's some areas, and
Hmm.
a lot of people don't understand that you have a group called Puerto Rican people.
Hmm.
That is true. There is a group
Hmm.
called Puerto Rican people from an island, and we've talked that they're attached to the U.S. They're
Yeah.
citizens. They can move to and fro. They vote
Hmm.
and all that. Okay, but further than that, that group of Puerto Rican people aren't just consolidated into themselves across the 100 years and more, even before joining the U.S.
Well,
They were no, no. Let me get the point out. Even before join, for 100 years or more, even before, those that isolated group has been marrying into other groups, and other groups have been
yeah.
marrying into them, and what you end up with is a web with a
Hmm.
nucleus of the category of Puerto Rican people, but tentacles that
Hmm.
branch into American society in ways that a more narrow-minded person would dismiss as not possible, and that will influence votes in ways that are not expected. You cannot go to a rally
Well, yeah,
and do a thing like that and expect it to be reasonable, is what I'm saying.
but all of that you just explained, except that last part, all excuse me, all of that you just explained to me, my opinion, my way of thinking, doesn't enter into it. If these people were from Vietnam, if he'd have said Vietnamese out here on the West Coast, they're not a U.S. possession. They're a sovereign nation on their own. You still don't do that.
Not in
It's
that
still
scenario.
it still isn't okay.
Yeah, not in that scenario.
You just don't do that. And it to me, I cannot fathom what would possess a person to think that's okay. To me, that's it's like the modern version of dressing up in blackface.
It made no
What
sense to me.
what person on the face of the earth thinks that that's a good thing to do?
It made no sense to me.
And the sad part of it is there are people out there that don't see a problem with it.
Well, but that's the whole thing, that the context of where that took place threw me for a
And
loop.
well,
Now it's true that in this world of politics of the US, and maybe outside of it, but let's say here,
yeah.
that a lot of things are used as tools in order to get
Oh,
people to
big time.
in order to get people to come over to your side.
Mm.
But I rarely have seen one of those tools being used to push people away.
Oh, no,
I
no,
was
that's more
since
common. That's more common than my
I
friend.
was I was no, not really. I was sincerely I was sincerely not really. I've never heard of, hey, all you people from X, Y, and Z, this is our group, our party, and we want you to vote for you, but we're gonna crap on your heads at the same time. I've never seen that. I mean, you may
I
have
have.
examples, but I mean that's fine. But my point is that I haven't seen it, and what I saw was so shocking
Yeah.
in terms of
Well,
like shooting your foot for for shits and giggles. It made no sense to me, but it happened, and
well,
I
then
couldn't
what
believe it.
we I don't believe I have a major axe to grind with the cancel culture. I prefer to do what we used to do in the 70s and 80s when something came out like that. We just marginalize that person, make them absolutely completely irrelevant. Careers have been ended that way.
Yeah,
Ended.
yeah, but the problem in this case is not
So
the person. That's not the
I'm
problem.
talking about the comedian. The
Yeah,
you disavow everything that he just said. He doesn't represent my opinions,
yeah,
and you minimalize him. You marginalize that person.
yeah. I
As
understand,
I
but
can't even remember his name, but think of the dude that played Kramer on Seinfeld. You don't see him in too many things these days.
no, because he stood
As
up in a comedy club and did what he did. But
yeah, and as it should be. I don't You don't cancel him, you marginalize him. You just say
similar,
you don't
sim,
get my money.
a similar scenario.
Mhm.
Will Smith getting up in the and this has nothing to do with it has to do with poor choices
Mhm.
that are so against the common thread of decency towards fellow human beings. So on that side, it links. Will Smith got up, walked up in front of the public, and
On live television.
and slapped another human being, and based on that, people were turned off. And
Exactly.
so here's the thing, that this is that sort of thing, but here's the repercussions of stuff like that. It puts in doubt to people, especially in the Puerto Rican community, to whatever
Well, of
degree I don't
course it
know,
would.
because let me just say, because those people have been called a garbage island and stuff. They're island and stuff, and that's not something that matches the scenario that of a rally.
No.
And the repercussions are this: that his comment attaches to the whole rally in their
Mhm.
minds,
Yeah.
or to the degree that it would. It's a factor.
That's wrong too. But yes, it will be used as a tool. That's to be expected, and that's why it's got to be disavowed, and the person has to be marginalized and minimized and just dropped. You know.
Well, but the person is, another way of looking at it is this way: it was so stupid. It was so stupid to do,
Mhm.
considering all the factors, that I almost want to think. Last thing I'll say: I almost want to think that it felt like a November or a October surprise,
October surprise. Ah,
because it's
I
so.
don't know. I don't know. I don't know enough about it.
No, I
So
don't know. I don't know. I'm just saying that
yeah.
it crossed my mind. It's so stupid. Now, again, you're talking about a percentage of the U.S. population, but they're in key swing states.
hmm
That's not. You know what I'm saying? That's not
hmm
a smart thing to do. Long story short, it's so stupid. I don't understand it,
Yeah, I don't
but
either.
whatever, whatever.
Yeah, I don't either. I don't get it. Which brings about, I know we got to think about landing the plane here, but which brings about a interesting point
Yeah.
in that this is our pre-Halloween show, our way of jumping out from behind the curtain and yelling "boo."
Yeah.
Um, Next Tuesday, 7 days, November 5th is
Hmm.
election day. Are we going to do a Trampled Underfoot podcast show on election day, or should we postpone it until Wednesday
We're gonna
and
put,
wait for all the kicking, screaming, and uh, crying to die down?
dude.
because it's going to happen on one side or the other. And
Yeah,
we are not a political show.
no, we should not do it live,
Hmm.
but we have planned a open to whoever wishes to within our groups of that we're familiar with, um, of an
Of a
what
hangout event.
of a hangout event to just shoot the breeze, an open door, whatever,
Hmm. Okay.
um, and to view it. I think
Okay.
we called I think we called it, when I shared the thought of doing it, a watch party is what
Oh,
it is.
okay. Watch party. Okay.
Bring your
All
own
right.
potato chips.
Yeah. Okay. BYOC. Bring your own coffee.
Yeah.
All right.
Oh my
Okay.
goodness. But Mark, ugh, I can't wait for this.
Yeah, I need it to be over with. I mean, and this is my cynicism as well. I mean, this is the run up to it. It's 7 days away. So we have 7 more days of political ads, of junk mail in our mailbox. We've got, you know, 7 more days. Well, no, we probably got another 30 days of political signs on every street corner. I mean, it's almost over.
Yeah, I
Hang in
mean,
there,
oh,
baby.
yeah, it's just like it's exhausting.
Mm.
It really, I think
Dude.
just one comment that
Mhm.
has to do with just, I think that enough is well enough. We've had half a decade already since the pandemic and this is not being, I'm just saying broadly speaking, half a decade since the pandemic of one exaggeration and freaking brick on our backs,
Lies and frauds and deceit
and
and
just constant and constant. I just want the easy. I know it's easier said than done. I want the easy. I want the slow ride. I want the easy.
well,
I want the comfort of let's coast.
let's go back to where we started this from, the ability to tune it out. The ability to tune it out. Go do something cool. Get out in the shop, make some chips, go fishing, go hang out with an older relative, go do whatever, but get away from it. We don't have to sit and watch it. We don't have to be constantly bombarded with this BS if we don't want it. You know, there is more to life than what's on anti-social media or the television or the radio. There's more to life than that.
Yeah,
So enjoy it. I mean, it's not life is not a destination, it's a journey. So let's have some fun.
yeah. I mean, if I could flush all these people
Oh
down the
yeah.
toilet. Oh,
Well, but be careful with that handle because there's a couple of cities not too far away from me would be the first to start spinning. All right.
it's just,
So,
it's like give us a break. Can we have some innocence in the world, some easy please, a little bit, whatever.
yeah,
Anyways,
I think Jim's got it right. If you want to be upset and agitated, watch the news. If you want peace and quiet, take a walk in the woods or beach or a place away from it all. I'm with you, Jim.
well, unfortunately, Jim,
And
just as one final comment, I love the sentiment, and I hate to throw a brick through that window, but in my locale, the only option there is the woods part because if I go to the beach, there's traffic. You'll be pulling your hair. There's traffic. There's people every. It's
dude,
just.
dude, just take the dog for a walk.
Oh, I
Does
do.
it does wonders to clear the mind.
I do that. I
I
do
know
that
you do it every
almost
night.
every day. But I'm saying that out of the options that Jim gave us,
Hmm.
um, the woods is the only one that I actually have. But you can't go there at night
Hmm.
because there's skeeters up the bazoozies. It
Well, if
just
then you need to wear pants if you're getting mosquitoes there.
yeah.
Okay,
Anyway,
we need to go ahead and land it.
all right. So our views don't reflect the sponsors. What it says on the ticker tape. We go live every Tuesday, 9:30 Eastern, 6:30 Pacific Coast time,
Mhm.
and this is the Trampled Underfoot podcast show. and we're here on YouTube, but we're also over on Facebook, Trampled Underfoot Podcast on Facebook. And we have a website, trampledunderfootpodcast.com. You can visit us there. We're also sponsored by.
Harneal Media. I've never clicked buttons so fast in my life. Harneal Media, your web solution. Let me tell you, if you haven't gone over to harnealmedia.com and clicked that contact us button and had a chat with Steve, do yourself a favor and get over there and do that. I mean, if you're even thinking about a website, a web store, maybe some merch with your company name or logo, or even just a baseball cap of your own with your own custom embroidered patches on it. He could hook you right up with a print on demand company that's going to take care of all the inventory, all the tax, collecting all the taxes, and all the shipping. And that's all right there at harnealmedia.com. He can set you up with a website where you can blog, you can put your products or your services out there in front of the masses and not worry about sites like Etsy that are going to charge you a commission on everything you sell and everything you list, I might add. Do yourself a favor, head over to harnealmedia.com. That's HARNEAL media.com. Sponsor trampledunderfootpodcast.com.
All right, guys, thank you for hanging out. We'll be back next week. In the meantime, you know, enjoy the things you love to do, but be safe in doing so. We are approaching the witching hour in a couple of days,
Ooh,
so
ooh,
enjoy that. I used
ooh.
to like putting on some like Charlie Brown Halloween stuff and this and that, but we're in a different world now. Do whatever you enjoy doing, but do it safe. We'll be back. See ya.
Peace.